Ladies and gentlemen, we are finally starting to see the cracks form around the anime industry. We're finally starting to see that its current form and how much anime is being produced and how much it's churning out, all for the hope that somebody's going to license it. Eventually, it's going to fall apart. This is something that I've been yelling from the rooftops for the longest time now, talking about how, with the whole merger with Funimation and Crunchyroll, with how HiDive themselves is starting to kind of fizzle away, with how Netflix and Disney pretty much only license 1 or 2 shows a season, that Crunchyroll growing so big, eventually Crunchyroll, being the dominator, will start calling the shots. And at that point, all of these anime studios that are opening up left and right because they know that if they make just some random anime, Crunchyroll will license and they'll make a bunch of money. That's where a lot of the anime industry seems to have been forming itself around, because so much of its revenue is coming from overseas distribution. They know that Crunchyroll is going to license it. They're going to pay whatever they ask. Well, now that Crunchyroll is the dominator, they get to choose how much they pay. And you're going to start seeing a lot of this stuff start to fizzle away. That 60 plus shows a season is going to start going away, which is honestly, for a lot of people, probably a heaven sent. It's a godsend for a lot of people. Like this season right now, summer 2025, it sucks. There's too much stuff. But yes, this is all being highlighted by one of the top producers at Kadokawa. The Chief Anime Officer, Daijo Kudo, did a recent interview. Thanks to Anime Corner here for doing the translation as well as pulling it from the article, because I can't, because it's behind some crappy paywall. But thank you, Anime Corner, for covering this, because I think this is really big. This is like one of those articles that pops up there that a lot of people don't realize just how important this is. So let's actually get into the actual article here. It says the top of North America anime streaming services, particularly Crunchyroll, arose in a new Toyo Kezai interview with Kadokawa Chief Anime Officer Daijo Kudo, who discussed the state of the company's overseas anime business and growth strategies. Kudo shared that the perceived boom in revenues from US streamers buying anime from Japan isn't all what it seems anymore. Again, reality is now hitting them. We can't keep doing this. While overseas anime sales revenue on a whole has been growing for years, the change in the US streamer landscape has led to an increased sense of uncertainty amongst selling titles overseas. Again, the merger of Funimation and Crunchyroll. That was a big hit, because Funimation and Crunchyroll, for those that forget or weren't around during that time in the anime, fandom, those two were fighting tooth and nail against each other for all licenses. They were competing. And when there's competition for a single title, you have a bid war, and the amount of money they get from the actual title goes up. Now that they're one company, there's no bid war anymore. You either have to hope that Netflix would care, but again, Netflix only wants 1 or 2 shows a season. Disney, again, doesn't really want much. They just want a couple to throw out there. Crunchyroll's the only dominator now. And the weakening power of HiDive Sentai Filmworks as a distributor service were highlighted as reasons. Again, they see that HiDive is slipping away. They're getting like, 1 or 2 shows a season anymore? Kudo says, to be honest, I think things are a little different now. Between Funimation, Crunchyroll, and Sentai, the impression was that distribution rights fees were growing. However, with Sentai's power as a video distribution service weakening, the composition of the buyers is becoming more like Crunchyroll and then everyone else. Yep, you either get Crunchyroll's attention or just hope that somebody else sees it. As a result, my impression is that more time is being spent on careful negotiations over purchase prices. Yeah, because literally when these companies come to Crunchyroll and they say, hey, you want to buy our title? They're like, oh yeah, sure, how much? How about this much? And Crunchyroll's like, nah, that's fine. We don't need it. Crunchyroll is no longer afraid of somebody else buying up the license. It's us or nobody else. Before, Crunchyroll was afraid of, say, Funimation getting it, and then users go to Funimation and sub there to watch the show. Crunchyroll doesn't have that fear anymore. People often think like Netflix and Disney and, again, HiDive is competition. No. Right now, for anime streaming, Crunchyroll technically has a monopoly. It's not 100% monopoly, but they have a dominance that it can be seen as a monopoly, because all the other services either have their own production going, they're paying into some certain property, or they have a focus they want, what type of show they want. Netflix often wants a certain type of show. Disney wants a certain type of pedigree in their product. That's the thing there. The article says the change in power dynamic of American streamers has led to more difficulty with selling distribution rights and receiving revenue. They quote Kudo saying, within the industry, there are works starting to appear where, when Crunchyroll doesn't buy the distribution rights, the overseas distribution revenue can't be predicted. Again, all this stuff is being, in a lot of cases, pre-planned. when they're in the production stages, when they're in the pre-production stages, they're figuring out what they're going to do here. And yes, in a lot of cases, they will be looking for who will license it. They will look for a distributor to license it out to, whether it's a Japanese TV broadcast service, whether it's a Japanese streaming service, and yes, overseas distribution. And when it comes to how much money they're going to put into the project and how much revenue they're expecting back, right now they're saying it's completely unknown when it comes to overseas. When before they go, yeah, we'll probably have a bid war between Funimation and Crunchyroll, and we'll probably have, a bid war between Sentai and Crunchyroll. They had an expectation that they're probably going to make quite a bit of their money back with that alone. Now they're not sure. Now they're going, it's only Crunchyroll now, and they might not even buy the license. And again, that goes back to my previous statement. This is something I've been fearing for a long time. I don't want to mean to sound doom and gloom here because it's going to correct. You're going to see a course correction. This doesn't mean that anime is dying. Even though I could totally put that as my thumbnail to get some attention to this video. It's not that anime is dying. It's just more of an aspect that before, all these companies were building studios and building production lines and production studios and all focused around the idea that they'll get that Crunchyroll, Funimation, High Dive money. So many were not even building around the idea of selling a source material. They weren't even building around the idea of distributing on television in Japan. They were focused on license money. Because again, if you look at those charts of how much money was coming into the anime industry through different sources like Blu-rays in Japan, selling music CDs, all that stuff, domestic versus international was beating it out. Now they can't do that no more. As for the works we handle in-house, we aim to avoid ending up in a situation by making decisions only after carefully drawing up an exit strategy from the start of the planning stage. They're pre-setting up this stuff. Another thing I kind of want to point out is that it's so interesting to see Kadokawa finally, or at least this individual, this Chief Anime Officer. I love that title. I want to become a chief. That's my new title. I want to be Chief Anime Officer of Otaku Spirit. I love that title. It's interesting to see that he's at least being vocal about this. They've been probably seeing this for quite a while, probably ever since Sony bought Crunchyroll. When that thing happened, he probably started seeing this. But if you guys go back, I did a video about a interview with a MAPPA CEO, Manabu Otsuka. In that interview, they say the anime industry is booming at the moment, but what are the potential risk factors in the future? And back there, which I want to say is probably at least a year ago, it was back when we got the numbers from Chainsaw Man's sales of their Blu-rays, and everybody was saying how it was a massive failure. It wasn't a massive failure. He mentioned in that interview that it kind of, it was satisfying. But the point there was that it was disappointing to them because why? Because they wanted to get away from relying on overseas distribution. They didn't want all their money for Chainsaw Man to come from Crunchyroll. They didn't like that. The MAPPA folks are smart. That's the one thing that I do give them credit. As much as people, and I will agree, the whole thing around the animators and how much they're pushing them, hate it. But I do love looking into how they think because they're very forward thinking. They built MAPPA from the ground up in a very different way for a purpose. But back there, he said the most recent risk is the trend of major overseas distribution platforms. A little while ago, the pachinko business was in its heyday, but that too has calmed down. Demand changes over time. It is dangerous to rely on any one demand, and it is important to be needed according to each era. Back there, again, I want to say a year, probably two ago, he was saying, don't rely on Crunchyroll. And now Kadokawa's seeing it. The article says this suggests that there are many niches within anime for other platforms to license titles and build a following if the fandom is there. Netflix, which together dominates the overseas streaming revenue market share with Crunchyroll, typically license only a few titles each season. Yep. They're not an anime streaming platform. They do have a title here and there, but they're not Crunchyroll. They're not even in the same ballpark. Notably, a genre that Kadokawa believes is difficult to sell to American streamers like Crunchyroll is boys love anime. Kudo was asked about what companies on the anime planning side need to be cautious of when adapting to Crunchyroll's procurement strategy. This is actually kind of interesting, and again, this is sort of a side effect of that aspect of Crunchyroll having that dominance. They're going to pick and choose what they want. This is where we're going to get into, again, a sort of side effect that people won't see. While aligning with their strategies to some extent, it's important to consider an exit strategy for each IP. For example, when discussing an anime adaptation of a boys' love work, it's not that there aren't any fans, but securing revenue from North America through platforms like Crunchyroll would not be easy. So the strategy would be to focus on markets in Asia and Japan, as well as on merchandise sales. So they're saying right here, we know that there's fans, but if we do one, we can't rely on Crunchyroll. I think that's mostly the idea that they just realize that Crunchyroll might not license it, or they're not going to want to pay much. I don't think this is like a Crunchyroll goes, ew, boys love. They have tons. I will give you one example that this isn't an aspect of not wanting boys love. Given. Given, I think, is one of the hugest boys love titles for them. They paid a lot into it. They were promoting this so freaking much. Crunchyroll was screaming on every platform, go watch Given. They gave it some massive fanfare. They were trying to promote this so freaking much. But look at the ratings. 57,000. As much as Crunchyroll pushed this so much advertising. I've seen advertising on so many platforms like YouTube and whatnot. They were pushing promotion for this so much. 57,000 rates. That's not much. A couple of cuckoos. That's got that much. This show, this dumb, stupid harem show, got more attention, and it wasn't even promoted even the fraction amount that Given was. It's just not popular. It's got a fandom. I'm not saying it doesn't have a fandom, and I know that I from what I watched of Given, I was enjoying it, and I see that there's a lot of people that love Given, but 57,000. Shoot, Skate Infinity, I think, is one of the... I think it's technically bait. It's not technically showing anything. It's very thirsty for that realm, but it's not technically that. Again, 40,000, and they pushed this so much compared to a couple of cuckoos. It's just not as popular. And I think that that's really what Crunchyroll sees, is that it's just not something that is what people want. And they're not going to pay a whole lot for it. That's the key thing. They're not going to pay a whole lot for it. But it goes back to my previous point. This is the major fear that I have around Crunchyroll having so much dominance, and that Kadokawa and companies like this are seeing that they have to sort of be very careful about what they adapt anymore and what will actually, take Crunchyroll's attention, that it's eventually going to get to a point where Crunchyroll chooses what gets adapted and what doesn't. This gets in the realm of censorship. Yes, I know. I'm not going to say like I'm totally sold in this apartment, but I can totally see it happening. That eventually, if Crunchyroll is the dominator, and because the industry itself is so focused on trying to sell to Crunchyroll, eventually you can have Crunchyroll dictate what gets adapted and whatnot. It's not going to cut out all. And again, they're saying it right here. We have to focus on Asia distribution. We have to focus on merchandise. We have to focus on something besides Crunchyroll. And again, what I said earlier with that MAPPA CEO, don't focus on Crunchyroll. You have to get your money somewhere else. Stop making things hoping they'll just buy it. I think this is a course correction. It's a crack in the industry. It's going to cause them to dial it back, which is honestly probably a good thing. But this is a sign, stop relying on Crunchyroll. They're not always going to be there to buy your product. I think this, again, is a bad sign, but at the same time, this is a good sign. This is a sign that these companies are waking up, just like MAPPA CEO did way back there. They're waking up and realizing we got to stop relying on Crunchyroll. Either that, or they got to start, pushing to Netflix. I know that Netflix wants to step up their distribution of anime. They really want to focus on that stuff, but they're not committing yet. They're just not committing yet. And you can see through the reports of their viewerships and whatnot, it's not doing insanely well for them. There's a title here and there like Sakamoto Days, my gosh, dominating their chart. Dandadan dominating their chart. A lot of titles are dominating their charts. I'm hoping that that will be that realization that, hey, we want to invest more. But they also know, they also do realize, Netflix also realizes that a lot of what is successful for their users is just very small number of titles. And they're not going to be like Crunchyroll of buy everything a season in order to get that market share of users. So I don't think that Netflix is going to go just like diving right into the pool of anime and just sucking up a whole crap ton of titles. Unless the price of the licenses comes down a lot and a lot of these companies start to really knock on Netflix's door to say, please take our titles. The other idea is possibly Amazon. Amazon Japan is huge with anime, but globally they're kind of very selective once again for what titles does go globally on their platform. But we have seen them finally come back to actually having one or two titles a season, which they weren't for the longest time. Maybe they possibly might start stepping it up. It's simply as the idea they already have in Japan, why not go global? And yes, a lot of that's because Crunchyroll is buying up all these titles globally, but eventually, again, Crunchyroll's not going to do that. And maybe Amazon coming back into the fray is because Crunchyroll's not buying up these titles. Who knows? But anyways, going back to my original point here and to wrap this up is, again, I think this is a little bit of a scare. This is a crack in the industry. This is a sign this cannot sustain itself. And I think they're doing a little bit of course correction here. This can be a good thing in the realm of them realizing they can't just keep turning out stuff for the sake of Crunchyroll buying it, but at the same time also kind of shift their mindset to not want to focus too much on Crunchyroll. And I think a lot of these companies are realizing they can't focus on the United States anymore either. I mean, I've several of my recent interviews literally has a bunch of different people echoing the same thing. Stop trying to be big in America. Focus on this country. Focus on this country. Try to get somewhere besides just here. But anyways, want to know what your guys' thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments down below. Again, thank you to Anime Corner for covering this. I'll put the link down in the comments as well. But I appreciate you guys' support. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, hit the like button down below. If you like this content and want to support channel more, become a member of the channel. Until next time, y'all take care.